Welcome back, everyone. Before we dive in, make sure you drop your thoughts and the lessons you took from this story in the comments. And don't forget to like and subscribe. Let's get into it. My name is Cameron Ellis. I am 38 years old, and I make my living as a professional dog trainer in Chicago. That Tuesday, I spent the afternoon working with a German Shepherd, teaching bite release commands to a client who worked security in the loop. The dog learned quickly, eyes bright, ears locked to my voice, and by the time we ended the session, the owner and I agreed the progress was excellent. I wore a charcoal wool overcoat over a clean white shirt and tailored trousers, a neat nod to a formal London sensibility that I always try to keep, even when I smell faintly of treats and leather leads. I packed my bite sleeves, leashes, and markers into a tidy duffel and stepped into the brisk evening with the simple promise of a quiet night hovering in my mind. Traffic was light along Lakeshore Drive. The sun was sinking and the streetlights were beginning to draw lines along the pavement. I imagined grilling a simple meal in my small backyard and then sitting down to a few hours of television, nothing demanding, nothing loud, just calm. When I turned down my block, I noticed my wife's car in the driveway beside her daughter's sedan. It did not strike me as unusual. Her daughter was 18, still living with us while she decided on college or work. The house looked trim and ordered, the lawn neat, and the porch swept. I took the keys from the ignition, reached for my duffel, and walked to the front door. The second I stepped into the living room, I felt the temperature of the house change. My wife, Erica, stood near the window in a fitted navy coat over a slate dress, her arms folded, her face tight in a way I had never seen. Her daughter, Autumn, sat on the sofa wearing a cream sweater and black skirt with opaque tights, her makeup streaked by tears. The air was still. The walls seemed to press closer. When they both looked at me, something inside me dropped, and I braced without knowing why. I set my bag down by the entry bench and asked what was happening. Erica did not answer right away. She stared at me, as if willing me to confess something I did not understand. After a long breath through her nose, she pointed at her daughter and told her to repeat what she had just said. Autumn lifted her blotched face and looked at me as if I were a stranger at the door. She said she could not believe I would do this to her, that she trusted me. My confusion was total. I asked, plainly, what she meant. Erica exploded. She started listing accusations that struck me like cold water to the face. Inappropriate comments, invasive glances, stepping into Autumn's room without knocking. Each word landed with a heavy, ugly force. My stomach turned because I knew immediately that none of it was true. Not a single thing. I raised my hands, palms out. I said this was insane and that I had never done any of it. I asked where this was coming from. Erica told me not to call her daughter a liar. Her voice climbed. She said Autumn had come to her an hour earlier in tears, and that she had been afraid to speak because she did not want to ruin our marriage. The image of Autumn crying for an hour while I was working with a dog and counting down the minutes to grilling hit me with a strange vertigo. I looked at Autumn, who was now burying her face in her hands again. I told Erica this had to be a misunderstanding and that all three of us should sit down calmly to talk. Erica said there was nothing to discuss. She wanted me to leave immediately. Her words were flat and final. I asked if she was genuinely ordering me out of my own home over accusations she would not even allow me to address. She said her daughter did not lie to her, and that she would always believe her over me. I let the words settle in my chest. For years of marriage, for seasons of holidays, repairs, birthdays, mornings, and I was not worth 5 minutes of questions. I said fine. I would pack a bag. Erica said no. I would take my keys and go now. She said I could collect my things later when she was there to supervise. The divide between us felt like it had opened in a single second, a clean break with no bridge. I looked at Autumn and caught her peeking at me through her fingers. For a brief fraction of time her expression sharpened, and there was no fear in it at all, only something like satisfaction. Then she buried her face and sobbed harder. That small flicker stayed with me. I pulled my phone from my pocket and called my oldest friend, Wesley Cole, a man who has stood beside me since high school. He picked up on the second ring. I told him I needed a place to stay for the night, and that I would explain when I arrived. I kept my voice calm because I felt neither rage nor sorrow yet, just shock. Erica followed me to the door and warned me not to contact Autumn. If I did, she said she would file for a restraining order. I told her she was making a terrible mistake, that she would figure that out in time. I walked out, slid into my truck, and pulled away with my hand steady on the wheel. Wesley lived on the near west side in a modest building with clean lines and careful plants along the entrance. He opened his door before I could knock, a freshly pressed dark cardigan over a crisp shirt, the kind of formal neatness that fit him as naturally as his even tone. He asked what happened. I told him I'd been accused of something I did not do, and that my wife had thrown me out without a chance to defend myself. He shook his head and asked what I needed. I told him a spare bed and the number for a good divorce attorney. Wesley raised an eyebrow and asked if I was sure I wanted to go that far immediately. I said I was more certain than I had been about anything in my life. He showed me the spare room. The bed was tightly made with a gray coverlet and pressed sheets. On the dresser sat a polished wooden valet tray and a neatly folded dark scarf, as if set out for a guest in a careful London flat. I thanked him and told him I would call a firm in the morning that a client once recommended. I slept badly. The scene replayed on a loop. The living room, the list of accusations, Autumn's sudden performance of tears. When morning came, I had already showered, shaved, and set out a tidy navy sport coat with a white Oxford shirt and black brogues, the kind of sober, formal look that makes me feel anchored. I drove downtown and called a law office called Coleman, Rhodes and Hart. The receptionist connected me to an attorney named Daniel Coleman. I described the situation without softening any part of it. He listened without interrupting. Daniel told me to document everything. He said I should preserve every text message, call log, and email, and that I should not delete anything. He instructed me not to contact Erica or Autumn directly, not even to correct a detail, and said that all communication should run through him from that point forward. I said I understood. He asked me to come in the next morning with financial documents, bank statements, tax returns, insurance policies, mortgage papers, anything that established accounts or assets. He said we needed to get ahead of anything Erica might try to do. I spent the rest of the day assembling a complete picture of our life on paper. I had always been organized, and my files were in order on my laptop and in a backup drive. I arranged statements and documents in labeled folders and copied everything to a thumb drive. Then I combed through my phone, saving text threads that showed our ordinary family cadence. Birthday messages, grocery lists, notes about dinner plans. Autumn had written 2 weeks earlier to ask me to help her practice for her road test. I had spent a Saturday walking her through parallel parking in a quiet lot. She had thanked me, calling me patient and kind. I captured every screenshot. When Wesley returned from work, he found me at his kitchen table surrounded by neat stacks and a notebook where I recorded dates and times. He wore a dark merino sweater and trousers with a subtle crease. Polished loafers lined beside the door. He asked if I was holding up. I said I was arranging my ducks in a row. I asked if I could ask him something direct. He said of course. I asked whether he had ever seen me behave in any way that could be interpreted as inappropriate toward Autumn. Wesley shook his head immediately and said I treated her like my own child, always respectful and appropriate. He said he never saw a single red flag. I asked if he would put that in writing if necessary. He said yes without hesitation, that he would write it that night if I wished. It was a small thing and a large one, the way a friend scratches a match to light a cold room. My phone buzzed. A message from Erica asked when I could collect my belongings. She said she did not want me in the house when she was alone. I did not respond. I forwarded the message to Daniel with a note that she was already controlling the narrative. He replied within minutes, praising the preservation of the message and repeating his instruction not to engage. I put the phone face down on the table. The next morning, I met Daniel Coleman in his office, a bright glass corner high above the street. He was younger than I expected, perhaps late 30s, with a measured way of speaking and a flawless charcoal suit that looked as if it had been tailored on Savile Row. He reviewed my files, nodding and making notes with a fountain pen. He said my record was clean, no violence, no prior accusations, steady work. He asked how long I had been married. I said 4 years. He asked if Autumn had ever shown patterns of manipulation or lies to get her way. I considered carefully and said yes, in small ways. She had lied about where she was going on a few occasions and had blamed others when she was caught breaking rules. Erica always excused it as ordinary teenage behavior. Daniel leaned back and said that patterns of dishonesty could be useful, not to attack her character, but to establish credibility and raise reasonable doubt about the accusations. I asked for the next step. Daniel said we would file for divorce immediately. He said we would establish that I was the one taking decisive action and that I was open to any investigation because I had nothing to hide. He said if Erica filed for a restraining order, we would meet it head-on and that she would not have evidence to support it. He told me to stay away from the house and avoid all contact. Then he slid the retainer agreement across the table. I read, asked 2 questions, and signed. He said he would have the papers drafted within the week. The days that followed moved with a strange, brisk clarity. Erica called and texted multiple times. I did not respond. I trained dogs, which brought a peace I could not find anywhere else. Animals care about clarity and consistency rather than gossip or suspicion. The clean geometry of a heel turn, the perfect timing of a release cue, the trust formed by repetition, all of it steadied my breathing. A regular client, named Serena, brought her joyful but frantic Labrador to the training field I used near Lincoln Park. Serena wore a tailored long coat, a silk scarf knotted just so, and leather gloves that looked brand new. She asked if I was all right because I looked tired. I told her I was dealing with some things at home. She said I was still the best trainer she knew and thanked me for being patient. When the hour ended, I watched her dog sit calmly for the first time and felt a simple, unadorned satisfaction. 2 weeks in, Wesley asked if I had heard from Erica. I said she had been sending messages, but Daniel had told me not to engage. Wesley said she had to be losing her mind wondering what I was doing. I said that was fine. Let her wonder. That night, I ironed a fresh white shirt and set it over the chair, polished my shoes, and arranged my small kit of cologne and cuff links on the dresser. Simple rituals that remind me of a London morning before court, even though I was only going to meet clients and run drills. 3 weeks to the day after I left home, Erica called. I almost declined, but curiosity made me answer. She said we needed to talk about me coming home and working through it. I asked what we were working through exactly, since she had thrown me out based on lies. I asked what had changed. She said perhaps I had taken time to reflect, and if I was ready to apologize and commit to counseling, we could move forward. Her assumption that silence meant surrender made me smile. I told her we should meet in person the next day. I offered to come by the house at 2 in the afternoon. She sounded relieved and said she would be there. The moment I ended the call, I dialed Daniel. I asked if the papers were ready. He said they were signed and notarized. He asked if I was sure. I said I had never been more sure. He laughed once without humor and told me to meet him nearby at 1:45. The next day I chose a dark suit, white shirt, and a narrow tie. I buffed my shoes to a steady shine and wore a camel top coat, a look that felt structured and unyielding. Daniel arrived in a deep blue suit and neatly folded wool scarf. We walked the 2 blocks to my house together. I rang the bell instead of using my key. Erica opened within seconds. Her makeup was careful and her hair set, the kind of composed appearance she used to reserve for special dinners. She smiled until she saw Daniel. Then her face went pale. She asked who he was. I told her he was my attorney and asked if we could come in. She stepped aside slowly. Autumn sat on the sofa with her phone, her black skirt and gray sweater arranged, as if for an audience. Her eyes darted between us in quick flashes. Erica crossed her arms and asked what was happening. Daniel opened his briefcase and handed her a manila envelope. He said these were divorce papers and that she was being served. Erica stared at the envelope as if it might hiss. She repeated the word divorce as if testing its weight. I told her I was completely serious and that she had made her decision 3 weeks earlier when she cast me out without hearing me. She said she had called to work things out, that she was willing to forgive me if I apologized. I asked what I was apologizing for exactly. For something that did not happen. She had believed lies without a single shred of evidence. Autumn stood and clutched her phone like a weapon. She said she had told her mother what happened and asked why I was acting like the victim. I did not look at her. I kept my eyes on Erica. I told Erica she would read the papers and contact her own attorney if she wanted a contest. I said I was not coming back and I would not apologize for something I did not do. I said I refused to stay in a marriage where I was guilty until proven innocent. Erica said we had built a life for 4 years, a home, routines, traditions. I said we had, but she ended that life when she chose to believe the worst without pause. Daniel cleared his throat and explained the division of assets. He said the house predated the marriage and remained in my name, so I was not asking for anything related to it, that joint accounts would be divided fairly through mediation if necessary. Erica stared at him, and then at me, and then at the envelope again, as if hoping it would transform into something else. I reminded her that what occurred 3 weeks earlier was not an argument or a misunderstanding. It was a character assassination based on unverified claims. Autumn began to cry in loud gusts. She said it was all her fault, and said she did not think it would go this far. I looked at her and told her she had not thought at all. That was not my problem anymore. Erica asked if we could speak privately. I said no. Anything she had to say to me would go through Daniel. Erica asked if I was truly going to do this. I said yes. Daniel closed his briefcase and gave Erica his card in case she had processed questions. We turned to leave. Erica asked if there was anything she could say to change my mind. I said there was not. Daniel and I walked to our cars in silence. He said it had gone exactly as he expected. He told me not to respond to any direct contact. I said I would not. Back at Wesley's, my phone lit up with calls and messages. I silenced it and placed it face down on the table. I spent the next day training a Belgian Malinois for a new client, a dog with a nervous energy that softened with each successful repetition. While I was packing my kit, Daniel called. He said Erica's attorney wanted a meeting and sounded desperate, mentioning new information. He asked if I could come the next morning. I said yes. Daniel and I arrived early to his conference room. He reminded me that Erica might try to pull the meeting toward emotion. He told me to focus on the facts and not to let the truth now offered rewrite the truth I had lived. At 10 exactly, Erica entered with her attorney, Ms. Whitaker, a woman in a navy suit, conservative and polished, her hair tied neatly, her shoes low and impeccable, as if she had stepped out of a London Chambers. Erica looked exhausted. No makeup, hair in a simple tie back, a long black coat buttoned high. She would not look at me directly. Ms. Whitaker began with careful language about mediation. Then she said her client had something to say and that she had advised her the conversation was off the record for now. Erica lifted her eyes. Her hands trembled. She said she had made a terrible mistake, the worst of her life. She said Autumn had lied about everything and had admitted it 2 nights earlier. The room went silent. Daniel's brows rose a fraction of an inch. I asked why. Erica said Autumn wanted her biological father back in her life and thought if I were gone, Erica would return to him. She said Autumn was 18 but still immature and did not understand the consequences. I lifted a hand and told her to stop. I said I did not want excuses. Autumn was 18 years old. She knew what she was doing. Ms. Whitaker said her client understood the severity and that Autumn would write a formal retraction and give a statement if needed. I said that was fine, but it did not change anything. Erica snapped her head up and asked what I meant. She said she had admitted she was wrong and that we could repair the damage. I said no, we could not. I told her she had destroyed our marriage the night she believed a lie without questions, that she had ordered me out of my home and threatened a restraining order. I said the truth now did not erase what she chose then. Erica reached across the table and begged me to reconsider. She said she loved me. I looked at her hand and did not move. I said she had not loved me when it mattered. She had not trusted me when it counted. She had shown me clearly that I stood below her daughter's word, even when that word was false. Erica said that was not fair, that she was trying to protect her child. I asked from what exactly? From the man who taught her to drive in an empty lot, who helped with school projects, who sat through band concerts and parent nights when her biological father did not attend. That man. Daniel suggested we take a moment, but I stood and said we were done. Erica stood as well, panic creeping in her voice. She said the truth was out now, and we could fix this. I said the truth was out 3 weeks earlier when I told her I was innocent, and that she had refused to hear it. Ms. Whitaker asked if we could talk about settlement terms. I said there was no common ground to find beyond the paperwork already filed. I said she could contest if she wanted to spend the money, but that I was moving forward either way. I walked to the door. Erica followed and asked what about everything we had built together. She gripped my arm with both hands. I looked at her hands and then at her face and said she ended those 4 years the moment she chose a lie over her husband. I pulled free and left the room. I heard Ms. Whitaker speaking to her quietly, but I did not listen. Daniel caught me in the hall and said I had handled myself well and given them nothing to manipulate. That afternoon, a text arrived from Erica that said she was sorry and asked me not to do this, that we could repair it. I deleted the message and blocked the number. The next week brought quiet. No calls. No accusations. No pleading. I trained. I ate well. I ran in the mornings along the lake in a fitted thermal top beneath a structured black windbreaker and taper track pants, even in motion, keeping a neat and formal profile. I began to sleep through the night again. Daniel called late one evening to say Erica had signed the papers and was moving forward with an uncontested divorce. No fight over assets. No custody to discuss. A clean break. I asked when it would finalize. He said the court date was 6 weeks out, the standard waiting period. He said he would keep me updated. I thanked him and sat in the dark for a while, listening to the radiator tick. Wesley was making pasta with roasted vegetables when I told him the news. He stood at the stove in a dark apron over a neat button-down, his sleeves rolled with perfect folds. He said he did not think Erica would sign so quickly. I said she had no choice and knew I would not return. He asked whether I would ever forgive her. I said perhaps one day, but that forgiveness did not mean forgetting, and it did not mean letting a person back into my life after they proved they could not be trusted. I said I was not holding a grudge. I was protecting myself. I found a small rental house on the east side of the city with 2 bedrooms and a fenced backyard. It had a garage that could be converted into a training workspace. The rental agent wore a houndstooth coat and a discreet tie clip and seemed pleased by my insistence on neatness. I signed the lease and moved in with Wesley's help. He lifted boxes in a crisp black hoodie and structured coat, the hybrid of casual and formal that suits a cold London morning and a Chicago street equally. Through our attorneys, Erica arranged a time for me to collect the rest of my belongings. She agreed to be out of the house. When I walked into the garage where I had built my workbench, the air felt strangely still. I ran a hand along the wood and told Wesley I would leave it. I did not want to carry something that belonged to that version of our life. He nodded as if that made perfect sense. We loaded the truck and drove back to my rental. A message came from an unfamiliar number as we were unloading. It was Autumn. She said she knew I probably hated her and that she deserved it. She said she was sorry, that she had ruined everything, that she did not expect forgiveness, and only wanted me to know that she understood how badly she had behaved. I stared at the message and considered replying, but there was nothing to say that would improve anything. I deleted the text and blocked the number. Wesley asked who it was. I said it was nobody important. The court date arrived in a gray morning with low clouds. I wore my one best suit, a deep charcoal with fine chalk stripes, a white shirt, a black knit tie, and a clean line of pocket square. I polished my shoes and wore a long black coat and leather gloves, a look as formal as any barrister in the city. Daniel met me in the hallway. Erica stood on the other side with Ms. Whitaker. She looked as if she wanted to speak, but she did not. The judge reviewed the documents and signed the decree. 30 minutes later, 4 years of marriage had become a piece of stamped paper. Outside the courthouse, Daniel shook my hand and said that was it. I was officially single. He told me I had done the right thing by refusing to let emotion override truth. I thanked him. I watched Erica and Ms. Whitaker walk to their car. Erica looked back once, as if memorizing a picture that no longer existed. I did not wave. I did not nod. I turned and walked to my truck. Wesley met me for lunch at a small diner not far from my new place. He wore a black pea coat and a soft gray turtleneck, the kind of formal clean style that sits nicely even in a casual room. He asked how I felt. I said relieved. He asked if I would start dating. I said eventually, but not soon. I needed to be alone long enough to remember who I was outside of the marriage. He said that was a wise choice. The rental house became a home with deliberate speed. I converted the garage into a training studio with rubber flooring, a small platform, hurdles, and storage for collars and lines. I set a teak bench along the wall and mounted hooks for leashes. I kept the space neat, almost elegant, with a single framed black and white photograph of a working dog in motion. Word of mouth brought more clients than I could schedule. I billed days that began early, ended early, and ran on time. I ran into Erica once by accident at a grocery store in Hyde Park. She wore a long belted coat and black ankle boots. Our eyes met near the apples. She opened her mouth to speak, then closed it. I nodded once in a simple acknowledgement and continued walking. I felt no anger or grief, only a flat neutrality. That was the first moment I knew, clearly, that I had healed past the wound. A few weeks later, Wesley told me he had heard through mutual friends that Autumn had moved to live with her biological father in another state. The guilt, he said, had become too heavy. Erica lived alone now in the house I had left behind. I felt neither satisfaction nor sorrow. It was simply true. I folded a training vest on the back of a chair and went back to work planning drills for the next morning. The weeks took on a carved, exact shape. I woke before sunrise. I brewed coffee in a French press and set it in a neat white mug. I wore fitted joggers with press seams, a slim black zip jacket, and crisp trainers for my run, a uniform as formal as athletic clothes can be. I returned, showered, and changed into a white shirt, a clean dark cardigan, or a subtle tweed blazer, and trousers, as if I were headed to an office, because appearance can set intention. Clients commented on it. I told them clarity matters to dogs, and it matters to us as well. One afternoon, a young couple brought me a trembling rescue pit bull named Ivy who would not step out of the car. The husband wore a wool overcoat and the wife a belted trench, their clothing neat and structured. I sat on the driveway and waited, letting Ivy sniff the air and make choices. After an hour of gentle desensitization, she took a treat from my palm. The wife said I had a gift. I said it was not a gift, so much as patience and clear boundaries. The wife laughed and said the result felt like a gift anyway. I took on a security contract to evaluate a small company's canine unit. The handlers wore precise uniforms with pressed trousers and polished boots. The dogs were Malinois and shepherds with beautiful drive and point-to-point focus. I walked them through scenario drills, reinforcement schedules, and decoy safety. I left a packet with a neatly typed list of recommendations and scheduled a follow-up. The work filled my days and satisfied my mind. The final accounting from Daniel arrived on a late spring evening. The email subject line said the case was closed, all accounts settled. I opened the file, reviewed everything, and then deleted it. I set the phone on the table beside a clean glass of water. A client's German shepherd waited in the backyard with a tennis ball, his posture proud and expectant, his coat glowing in the angled light. I stepped outside and threw the ball. He sprinted like an arrow across the grass. In the weeks that followed, I began to rebuild smaller things I'd let drop, habits that are deceptively ordinary. I joined a recreational softball league. I started a weekly dinner with Wesley and 2 other friends, each of us arriving in dark trousers, crisp shirts, and smart coats, the quiet uniform of men who care about order. I chose a handful of books for my nightstand and put away my phone after 10 every evening. My house began to feel like a well-ordered room in a quiet inn. Everything in its place, nothing shouting. One rainy Saturday, I drove to a used furniture store and found a narrow sideboard with clean lines and tapered legs, a piece that looked like it could belong in a London terrace. The owner, a woman in a burgundy cardigan and precisely tied scarf, told me it had been refinished by a craftsman in Milwaukee. I measured the wall in my dining room and knew it would fit. I loaded it with the care of a mover and drove home through a ribbon of mist. I received an email from Serena asking if I could board her Labrador for a weekend while she attended a conference in Atlanta. I said yes and set the room with a fresh blanket and a neatly folded towel, a small water bowl polished to a shine. When Serena dropped the dog off, she wore a sleek black coat and low heels that looked made for walking. She said the dog practically dragged her to my door, which she took as the best review a person could ask for. I laughed and told her I would send her updates each day. On Sunday evening, I stepped out back after feeding the Labrador and stood in the cool air. My neighborhood hummed in the distance, but my yard felt quiet, a square of privacy cut from the larger city. I realized I had not thought about the accusations in days. The memory remained, but it had been filed away in a drawer labeled completed. Wesley texted to ask if I wanted to meet for a late tea at a small place he liked. I put on a wool coat and met him under an awning that dripped with rain. We sat by the window. He wore a dark suit with an understated pocket square, and I wore a concise navy blazer that fit like a second skin. He asked how it felt to be on the far side of it all. I said it felt like breathing steadily after a long sprint. He asked whether I had any second thoughts. I said no, because there is no way to build a life with a person who will believe the worst about you without evidence. He nodded slowly, his eyes thoughtful. We're at my studio spread. A woman named Patrice brought me a German shepherd bred for sport. She wore a structured beige coat and black gloves, her hair gathered in a knot. She had heard about my calm approach, she said, and wanted to build her dog's focus without losing his joy. We worked a heel pattern across the floor, marking exact footfall and rewarding precise head position. And then we played freely in the yard. The dog ended the session panting and proud, and Patrice shook my hand with a happy restraint. She said she would tell her friends. I kept a log of every client, every drill, every achievement. I kept a separate log for my life. On Tuesdays and Thursdays, I lifted weights in a quiet gym with high ceilings and neat rows of machines. On Sundays, I walked along the lake in a long coat and scarf, gloves tucked into a pocket, my steps steady, my thoughts orderly. This was not penance. It was simply the way I prefer to live, as if each day is a clean page. One afternoon in early summer, I saw Erica again. She was walking out of a pharmacy with a small paper bag, a soft gray dress under a black trench, her hair pulled back, her face bare. She saw me and paused. For a heartbeat, I wondered if I should nod. Instead, I let the moment pass without acknowledgement. It was not cruelty. It was simply a line that did not need to be redrawn. She turned away and walked her car. I took 2 weeks to visit my brother in Detroit. We ate dinner in a small restaurant where everyone dressed as if they respected the night. A woman at the bar wore a tailored coat that fell like water and a pair of simple earrings that caught the light. The city felt like a cousin to Chicago, full of edges and music. I helped my brother's neighbor teach his terrier a recall in the alley, calling the dog past distractions on a long line until he ran in my hand, as if it was inevitable. When I returned, I found a handwritten note under my studio door from Ms. Whitaker. She wrote that she appreciated my composure in a difficult process, and that she wished me well. The handwriting was elegant and precise. I placed the note in a small box on my shelf. I did not keep it as a trophy. I kept it because professionalism deserves a space. A man named Corey called about a Belgian Malinois that had begun to guard the front door a bit too intensely. Corey arrived in a deep green coat and dark slacks, his shoes polished to a quiet shine. We worked through thresholds, calm sits, and patterning out of the front room, so the dog learned to look for Corey's guidance instead of assuming the role. By the end of the session, the Malinois laid calmly on a mat while we drank tea at the kitchen table. Corey said it felt like a miracle. I told him it was only practice and clarity. I started hosting a small seminar on Saturday mornings. 6 handlers at a time. Formal attire was not required, but everyone seemed to arrive a degree more polished than at an ordinary class. Structured coats, clean trousers, simple dresses, tidy shoes. I noticed that when people dress with intention, they move with intention. The room's energy lifted. The dogs noticed too. They mirrored us, steady and attentive. On a Wednesday, I found a last of Erica's paperwork in a box I had overlooked. I opened it and saw a photograph of her and Autumn at a fair, both in summer dresses, both smiling. I set the photograph aside and took out the documents I needed. Then I placed the photograph in a manila envelope, sealed it, wrote a forwarding address on the front, and dropped it at the post office without a return address. I felt lighter for releasing it. Serena invited me to a small gallery opening. She wore a midnight dress beneath a trench and elegant black heels, and I wore a dark suit with a muted tie. We walked through rooms of photographs, many of working hands and street corners, images of labor and routine rendered as art. She asked what I saw. I said I saw order and craft. She smiled and said that figured. We spoke for 2 hours without touching the architecture of my past. Later that week, a message arrived from Daniel with a simple sentence. One last administrative matter resolved. I replied with a thank you and asked him to send his final invoice. He did. I paid it the same day and filed the receipt. The case that had upended my life now fit in a narrow folder in a locked drawer. There was something elegant about that. Autumn wrote one more time from a new number. She said she did not expect a reply and only wanted me to know she was in counseling and that she had told the truth to every person who needed to hear it. She said she knew it did not reimburse what she had taken and that she would carry the weight of her choice for years. I read the message and then deleted it. I did not block the number. It felt unnecessary. My business reached a point where I had to schedule a cancellation list. I hired a young assistant named Rochelle who arrived for the interview in a neat blazer, a pencil skirt, opaque tights, and low heels, her hair smoothed into a bun. She took notes with a fountain pen and kept her planner so clean it could have been displayed. Her presence made everything run more smoothly. She had a talent for kindness that never tipped into softness. Rochelle asked me once, carefully, whether I regretted not fighting harder for the marriage after the truth came out. I told her the fight was not about truth. It was about trust. The truth had been present from the beginning. Trust had not. She nodded and said she understood. She said sometimes people believe that apologies are a bridge when the river has already been rerouted. I told her that was exactly right. On a late afternoon, the sun slid low, turning my backyard into squares of gold and shadow. The German Shepherd from that first Tuesday returned for a refresher session. He stood at my side like a monument, waiting for my cue. I stepped off, and he matched me, heels so tight he could have been sewn on my trousers. I'm marked, rewarded, and released. We played. He leaped and barked, and then dropped to a down when I asked, eyes bright. His handler laughed and clapped, standing in a clean wool coat with a herringbone pattern that caught the light. I walked back inside and hung my coat on the peg by the door. My home smelled faintly of cedar and coffee. The sideboard gleamed. The small studio waited for the next day's work. I stood for a long moment in the quiet, breathing in and out. There is a line between bitterness and resolve that can be difficult to see until you stand on the far side of it. I had chosen resolve. People sometimes say that a single event can define you. I used to believe that was true, but now I understand that what defines a person is not an event, but a string of choices. I chose to protect the peace I had built. I chose to walk away when trust had been burned to the ground. I chose to rebuild with care, one precise habit at a time, and to dress each day the way I wanted my life to feel, orderly, respectful, and quietly elegant. I finished the day in my chair by the window. A light rain began to fall, lining the glass with neat paths. I thought of the first night at Wesley's, of the living room where everything cracked, of Daniel's careful suit and the judge's pen, of Serena's scarf and Patrice's steady handshake, of dogs moving like decisions made visible. I thought, too, of Autumn's last message and Erica's face in the grocery store. All of it was a life, not a fable and not a warning, only a life that required me to choose. Outside, a car passed and sent a thin wave along the curb. The city breathed. The rain steadied. I stood, turned out the lamp, and walked to the back door. The yard glowed slightly with the streetlight. I opened the door and stepped out, feeling the cool air touch my face. The night held its shape like a well-cut coat. The German Shepherd would come in the morning. I would iron a shirt and polish my shoes. I would make coffee and write down the day's plan. There would be new clients and careful drills and dogs who needed what all of us need: patience, clarity, and a person who keeps promises. I closed the door, set out the leash I would use first, and smiled at the thought of another clean page. If you enjoyed this story, please like, comment, and share this video with your friends. Subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss a powerful story drop.